What's up, guys? Jay Wadsworth, Rick Rogers, both with Effective Fitness Combatives. I'm one of the co-owners. Rick is one of my lead instructors, and I just wanted to kind of address a few issues that we think are really good points, but could be addressed maybe in a different way. There's been a lot of companies and a lot of people coming out and addressing like how de-escalation can be becoming dangerous, the failing of de-escalation becoming dangerous. And as much as we agree with that, Rick and I were talking about this the other night when he picked me up from the airport, was that we believe that cops aren't making the correct decisions sometimes and waiting too long for the right use of the force to be utilized. But it's not really a de-escalation issue. I think it's more of a reasonable use of force issue. So what I mean by that is when we were talking about it, we believe and how we teach de-escalation is it's not just verbal. De-escalation is used at all levels of force, whether it's verbal, that could even be before verbal, officer presence, verbal, good hands-on control tactics, single or team control, creating distance, getting to a less lethal tool, presenting it, still using verbal dialogue, even when we present our guns. Police officers present their guns all the time and then de-escalate the situation verbally at gunpoint. So understanding that de-escalation is in all levels, I think most people look at de-escalation as just verbal. When we look at de-escalation as just verbal, it fails in verbal a overwhelming majority of the time, but it's also very productive in verbal. We just don't hear about all the good accounts of it being utilized and being solved. So I do think that de-escalation is looked at wrongly. I think de-escalation should be trained at all levels. And if we look at it like that, then de-escalation isn't dangerous. What is dangerous is the improper use of force and decisions by officers. And that just comes down to training again. And kind of like what we were talking about, the public perception of what force is actually and what the right uses of force are. So like I brought it up to Rick and we were talking about it because another video was put out there and it was really well constructed and it's very good company. But again, it's just talking about de-escalation in the verbal aspect of things. More so what I think it is going to be is it's going to be what officers are worried about the public perception is going to be of their use of force. And instead of using what Graham Connor says is a reasonable amount of force, they're using a minimal amount of force. And we've seen how many times that when officers come in with a minimal amount of force and they should be using a reasonable amount of force, it usually escalates up. Now, just because it escalates up and officers have to escalate in force, it doesn't mean it's not justified. Most of the time it is justified. Just there could have been better options if we came in with the force level necessary. It probably would have stopped that from escalating to whatever top form they have to use.
Yeah. Anytime we talk about this all the time. You can use too much or too less force and you can have dire outcome because you chose that wrong level of force, whether it's too little or too much. Again, I think de-escalation is like it's a great concept and it's something you need to think of conceptually, not as like just the tactic.
Yeah, it's 100% de-escalation is a concept, and what we have to think about is de-escalation can be used in all levels, and we don't think that everyone just randomly in the public perception is de-escalation is just verbal de-escalation in time. We can't always create time by distance. Sometimes time is created by actually controlling a suspect and he might still be fighting, but if we have really good control, we're still de-escalating him, but we're out of the verbal. We're actually now into a control tactics. We're still keeping that verbal dialogue, but again, we're using control for time, okay?
And de-escalation.
And then de-escalation, right? So understanding that like if that use of force goes up, it's possibly justified, but again, maybe it went up because we used too minimal amount of force or didn't make the proper decision or didn't make a decision to use a reasonable amount of force when it was necessary at that time. And so then it escalates up. And again, we have three ways of discussing what force is. It's minimal or not enough, okay? Reasonable, which is what Graham Connor tells us as a profession we can use, and then excessive. Right? Everybody already knows excessive isn't what we want, and that usually stands out, okay? Now, another thing that the public perception doesn't understand is just because the force is being utilized and it's not effective doesn't mean it's excessive. Ineffective force gives that appearance of excessive a lot of times, right? Maybe the guy is fighting and the officers have their baton out and they're hitting him. It's just pain compliance. So they're probably in the level to be able to strike the guy in the leg with the baton, but the guy's high. Adrenaline's a great drug. Maybe he's intoxicated. He's not feeling any pain, so he's fighting through it, right? So just because they continue to go to the baton over and over again, they stay on this what we call hamster wheel, and they fail to start making decisions and go to other levels of force or other options. It looks excessive, but sometimes it's not. Sure, can it get to the point of being excessive? We saw that like years ago in Rodney King. That's been corrected as far as stuff, but a lot of times you'll see it still used and it just doesn't work very well. Once it fails, we need to go to a next option instead of keeping on that hamster wheel of something that's continuing to fail. We see this with striking a lot as well, right? I'm still a huge fan of striking in force options when it's needed, more so to create a distraction, utilizing it to create space for me to create distance, or utilizing it for me to close space on an actively combative subject. Now, an actively resistant subject, I'm not a huge fan of striking just because I don't think most of the time it just doesn't fit to the bill of what we're looking to as far as getting the response we need.
Right.
You know, like
risk injury to ourselves a lot of the time.
Correct. And like if I'm punching a guy 2 or 3 times and he's not responding, I have to hit him to the point of incapacitating him, then get the desired effect. It's in an actively resistant like level of force, which means he's actively trying not to get arrested, pull away, flex up, maybe run, but he's not actively trying to assault us. So when that's occurring, okay, we understand that, hey, control tactics are probably better off there because I can utilize that to control him. Control gives us time. Again, time and verbal commands together with that control gives us better decisions, better options. So I want people to think about this for a minute. Force options are not enough, reasonable, excessive, okay? A lot of times when you use the minimal amount of force necessary, okay, less than what the reasonable amount would be, it's going to escalate because it fails. And when it fails, it escalates. Now, the cop has to escalate up in his use of force. Now, that force level might be warranted or might be justified, but why did it get there? Usually it gets there because our control or our ability to create distance and bring a tool up and verbally de-escalate a distance just isn't there, right? Moving properly, proper control tactics. And then it all comes down to decision making and confidence, right? If the officers are better trained, they're going to make better decisions. Of course. If they're not trained, they're going to start to panic when things don't go well and fail.
They really escalate.
And then they really escalate, or they make poor decisions because they're not trained well. Right. And then when it starts to fail, okay, now it's failing in an environment where like people can get injured and killed, not just suspects, but officers, civilians that are involved in the situation. So again, de-escalation is one of those things that we're a huge fan of it. But we also believe that de-escalation is going to be in multiple levels of force and force options versus saying, hey, de-escalation is failing. De-escalation fails all the time in certain levels, and then de-escalation works in multiple different levels. So again, I think the topic is more so of just poor decision-making on using reasonable force versus minimal force, right?
That's what it boils down to.
That's what it comes down to. So hope you guys liked the video. If you guys want to follow along, this is obviously my personal YouTube. The company YouTube is Effective Fitness Combatives. And then you can check us out on Instagram as well, EF Combatives. And my personal page is Wadsbjj. And then Rick Rogers also owns a black belt, and he owns a gym, Lumber City in North Tonawanda. So if you're in the Buffalo, Niagara Falls area, check him out. Sweet. Let's see how she turned out.